For 17 years, I have dedicated myself to the art of teaching. Enough time has passed to understand where to set boundaries, long enough to discern the difference between a mere glance and something far more profound. He occupied a nondescript seat in the back row, blending into the sea of faces around him, lofty, with a commanding presence, silent in a manner that left you pondering the depths of his thoughts. He was known as Evan Calloway, 17, respectful, intelligent, punctually ahead of time, ever vigilant. The moment I truly saw him, was at an after-school tutoring session. He lingered into the evening to complete a paper that he hadn't even required assistance with. "I simply want to ensure it's satisfactory," he had remarked. I inclined my head in agreement. That was typical. Yet, as I returned it, our fingers lightly grazed against one another. And he remained steadfast, not retreating. Not immediately. Just the right moment for a flicker to emerge. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I appreciate it, Mrs. Taylor. There is nothing amiss with it. Everything seems perfectly normal. Aside from the manner in which it resonated." He savored the way my name rolled off his tongue. I reassured myself that it was all just a figment of my imagination. I felt weary. I had to return home, prepare dinner, evaluate essays, and fold laundry. Anything to distract myself from that peculiar little pause. Yet, as the night deepened and silence enveloped my vacant kitchen, an unsettling realization dawned upon me. It felt like ages since someone had uttered my name in such a way. As if it held significance. As if I held any significance. And I loathed myself for allowing it to resurface in my mind. Yet I did. And what could be more dire? I longed to listen to it once more. Initially it was scholarly. He requested a review of his essays. Then to revisit the readings he asserted didn't quite resonate. Then on one occasion, he lingered to assist me in res-tacking the chairs after class, despite my not having requested his help. He remained largely silent. Silently navigating, ever observant. What struck me the most was the way he gazed at me. Distinct from the other students. Not in the manner of an instructor. A hidden truth that beckoned his curiosity, despite the unspoken rules against it. Each Thursday, he lingered long into the evening. It was then Tuesday and Thursday. It was at that moment when the final bell tolled. At times he would take a seat opposite me, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk while we feigned a discussion about sentence structure. At times he would simply observe me as I graded. "You always don that ring despite its looseness," he remarked one time. I glanced upward, taken aback. He gestured toward my left hand. "You twirl it when anxiety creeps in." Words eluded me. Thus I was not truthful. He remarked, "Old habit." He gave another nod. Did not exert pressure. Yet, the following day, I found myself twirling it once more, quicker, more compact, while his gaze tracked the movement as if he were etching my image into his memory. There was an essence about him that seemed to carry the weight of years beyond his actual age. Excessively quiet. Excessively stable. I repeatedly assured myself that it was all just a figment of my imagination. Yet I found myself not in that place. On a Thursday, as he gathered his things to depart, he lingered at the threshold. Retreated. "Do you ever find yourself feeling lonely, Mrs. Taylor?" I blinked. "Pardon me." He gave a casual shrug, his backpack resting effortlessly over one shoulder. "You strike me as a person who holds many thoughts close to the chest." I chose not to respond. I was unable to. He lingered in anticipation. He then offered a smile, that signature half-smile he had mastered, and remarked, "Until tomorrow." And in an instant he vanished, departing with only a vacant resonance lingering in the space, and a question that lingered in my mind, refusing to fade away. When did I begin to anticipate 3:15? I consistently keep the door to my classroom ajar. Regulations governing the educational institution, and security, and lucidity. Yet on that day the rain fell steadily, resounding, weighty, the sort that silences all, including your wisest instincts. Evan arrived after the expected time. His hair was damp, the hoodie clinging to his arms. He brushed it away like a dog shaking off water at the threshold, a soft chuckle escaping his lips. "I'm drenched," he remarked. I smiled, only to recall that I shouldn't have. He set his bag down by the heater and took a seat opposite me. We began to review his writing, or at least feigned interest in doing so. Frequently, he posed inquiries to which I was certain he already possessed the answers, and I responded to them as if I hadn't begun to lose sight of where the boundary lay. 10 minutes slipped away, then 2 decades, and then, with an ease so subtle I nearly overlooked it, he rose to his feet and shut the door behind him. Not entirely, sufficiently ample, sufficient to silence the corridor, sufficient to alter the atmosphere that surrounds us. I raised my gaze. He locked his gaze with mine, embraced them. "The noise is overwhelming," he remarked. "Your voice gets lost in all that noise." I ought to have declined. I should have risen from my slumber, reopened it once more. Yet I refrained. I remained seated in my chair. Quiet. Allow the stillness to envelop you. He eased back into his seat, arms draped over the desk, his gaze locked onto me as if I were the sole source of clarity in an otherwise chaotic universe. We returned to the process of refining. Yet all had changed. The atmosphere in the room was uncomfortably warm. His laughter lingered in my chest far too long. As I handed him the paper, our fingers brushed against each other. Once more. Yet, on this occasion he remained still. I didn't either. The tempest beyond the window continued its furious assault. And what about the one that resides within me? Commenced. The day was Friday. A dreary, languid day that stirred a sense of unease in everyone. My final class had dismissed ahead of schedule. A spirited pep rally or a postponed quiz, the details escape me. Yet he remains etched in my memory. Evan lingered in the shadows. Once more. He perched on the edge of a desk, a half-smirk dancing at the corners of his lips. His sleeves were rolled up, exposing the forearms I had deliberately avoided gazing at for too long. "You have a habit of donning black on Fridays," he remarked. I raised my gaze from the screen of my laptop. "It feels cozy." He gave a slight nod. "It suits you well." I ought to have reprimanded him. I pointed out that it was inappropriate. Yet I refrained. In place of that, I simply remarked, "You have a keen eye." He gave a slight shrug, merely regarding matters that capture my attention. Silence enveloped the room. He allowed that sentence to linger in the air, as if it carried a weight beyond its true significance. Suddenly, as if plucked from thin air, he inquired, "May I inquire about something intimate?" For a moment I paused. "It varies," I replied. He inclined his body, resting his elbows upon his knees, gaze locked with mine. "Could you share your first name with me?" I stood still, caught in a moment of sheer disbelief. It was merely a trivial detail, an inconsequential inquiry. Yet it was not. I had ceased to be Anna long ago, ceased to be addressed in that manner by those who spoke it as if it held significance. I parted my lips. "It has been closed." In that moment, almost a whisper, I uttered, "Anna." He echoed my words to me, gently, at one time, as if he were savoring it. "Anna. Definitely not Mrs. Taylor." "Not at all, ma'am. Only Anna." And in that instant I recalled the sensation of truly being noticed, not for my endeavors, yet in light of my true self. And that filled me with dread. It was all in the manner of his delivery. It lacked the tone of inquiry. The sound echoed like a door creaking open. I ought to have prevented it from occurring. However, I did. Initially, it seemed incredibly diminutive, utterly innocuous. He loomed behind me, hovering over my shoulder as I assessed the work before me, something that holds no significance anymore. My hand glided the crimson ink across the page, yet my mind wandered far from the words before me. His breath was palpable, a whisper against the silence. His posture, a fraction too near, suggested an intimacy that lingered in the air. Yet I remained steadfast, refusing to retreat. I ought to have. Yet I refrained. He posed a question to me, the specifics have slipped my mind. As I shifted my gaze to respond to him, that's when it occurred. His hand rose, measured and intentional. He extended his arm and tucked my hair behind my ear. It's a modest act, unremarkable, yet it was personal in a manner that took my breath away. His fingers hesitated, hovering in the air. merely a heartbeat beyond the moment. His knuckles grazed the contour of my cheek. I found myself immobilized. Every nerve in my being ignited with intensity. Years had passed since anyone had caressed me with such tenderness. It has been years since a gesture so simple brought me a sense of authenticity. I redirected my gaze to the paper before me, feigning ignorance, my heart pounding in my throat. And then he murmured it softly. Anna. Quiet. Not arrogant. Simply gentle. As if it were a hidden truth. I averted my gaze from him. I was unable to. Yet, I sensed his presence lingering just behind me, patiently anticipating. The atmosphere surrounding us crackled with tension, akin to the sweltering moment just before a storm unleashes its fury. I cleared my throat. He remarked, "It would be best if you went." He remained silent. He gently lifted his bag, taking his time, strolled over to the door, stopped. Then, with an air of nonchalance, he remarked, "You occupy my thoughts quite a bit." And then he departed. I lingered in that spot for nearly an hour following that moment, struggling to find my breath, struggling to recall the essence of my being before. He made me feel valuable once more with his touch. It was merely a figment of imagination. Yet it lacked that essence. It seemed tangible, more genuine than anything I've experienced in years. I found myself in the midst of my classroom. The door stood shut. The illumination was dim. I can't recall how he arrived, just that he was already there, reclining against my desk as if it were his rightful place. What about me? I felt completely at ease. Ibura no gil. I approached him with the ease of someone who had done it countless times before. He uttered my name, Anna, with that familiar tone he reserved for the tangible world. Gentle. As if his only desire was to have me near him. I extended my hand toward his face. He pressed his lips against my palm, and I shattered. In the dream it lacked any hint of scandal. It was not incorrect. There existed neither a daughter nor the constraints of classroom rules, nor the shadow of fear. It was merely two souls yearning. He removed my clothing with deliberate slowness, as if I held significance, as if he yearned to etch the contours of every line upon my skin into his memory. Upon awakening, I found myself drenched in sweat, isolated in my sanctuary of sheets, twisted sheets. My throat feels parched. A profound ache settled within me, a loneliness that had at last revealed its true identity. I reclined, gazing at the ceiling, my hand resting on my abdomen, murmuring, "No, absolutely not. No." For I understood its significance. Dreams reveal the truths you keep hidden within. And the reality was as follows. I found that my desire for him had faded away. He was essential to me, not merely confined to my bed. Yet within the depths of my being, there were fragments I had long silenced, the elements that yearned for visibility, and I loathed myself for it. Yet it was insufficient to bring everything to a halt. At precisely 3:10 the bell chimed. Chairs screeched against the floor. Backpacks securely zipped. The sound of laughter echoed through the corridors. My students flowed out in the familiar tide, some offering hasty farewells, others casting only a fleeting glance. Yet Evan remained. I observed him remaining in his seat, feigning a leisurely packing process, anticipating. And I feigned ignorance to the unfolding scene. I gathered documents. With a soft click I engaged my pen, organized what was already in order, until it was merely the two of us, in stillness. He rose to his feet, bridged the gap that lay between us with deliberate strides. Unhurried, unwavering, absolutely certain. I pivoted, prepared to deliver a measured response, something devoid of bias, but he interjected before I could. "I understand that my presence here is questionable." His voice carried a hushed timbre, unwavering. "Yet, I am aware that you continue to ponder my presence. In the same manner, you have remained on my mind incessantly." I attempted to utter his name, to reprimand, to amend, yet he moved in closer, so near that I could sense the warmth emanating from him. He extended his hand, and softly tucked my hair behind my ear once more. The identical motion. Yet, on this occasion he pressed on without hesitation. His fingers glided softly along my cheek, my jaw. Yet I remained still. failed to exhale. It did not deter him. "Anna," he declared, a steady voice devoid of any doubt or embarrassment. "Command me to go. I ought to have. I had the desire to. Yet my lips remained still. Because every part of me was pleading to remain." He leaned in, his forehead gently touching mine. And for a fleeting moment, we simply existed in that space, sharing the same breath, grasping an entity that eluded our understanding. Then he leaned in and murmured, "Please tell me this isn't happening." Yet I remained silent. For that very reason, it felt overwhelmingly authentic. Nothing else instilled such fear within me. It felt more like an inevitability. Not quite. It seemed as though a conclusion had long been reached. Through the fleeting gazes, the stillness, the silence I maintained when he ought to have departed, it occurred in an instant, or perhaps a myriad. I can't quite recall whether I closed my eyes first, or if it was him who took that step into darkness. What lingers in my mind is the sensation of his lips against my own. Cozy, gentle, indeed, as if he had been etching it into his memory for weeks. And I remained steadfast, refusing to retreat. Initially, that wasn't the case. Not afterwards. I surrendered to his embrace. In that serene, fleeting instant where I was free from the roles of teacher, mother, or any obligation. It was simply me. Anna. His hands caressed my face with a tender touch. He kissed me as if he feared I could shatter, or vanish into thin air. In that fleeting moment, I nearly convinced myself that we could remain in that place for all eternity. Concealed, pristine, unaccountable. Yet, in that moment I became aware of footsteps approaching. Not nearby. Merely whispers drifting from the corridor. In an instant I was jolted back to the present moment. Yanked away as if the ground beneath had suddenly vanished. He retreated as well, his breath uneven. His gaze brimming with an emotion that terrified me far more than guilt ever could. Affection. Or perhaps something akin to it. I gently placed my fingers against my lips. It retains a lingering warmth. Still electrified. "We cannot," I murmured. He inclined his head in acknowledgement. Yet there was no trace of remorse in his expression. Far from it. "I would gladly do it once more," he remarked. "If you'd allow it, I'd shower you with 1,000 kisses." And that? It was at that instant that I came to understand. The hour had grown too late. It began with a fleeting look. A girl in my third period, Harper, cast a glance my way as I entered the room. Not lacking in respect. Simply awareness. As if she had witnessed something extraordinary. As if she possessed a hidden knowledge. As I walked by, a boy whispered something quietly to himself. I missed some of it. Sufficiently so. I wager she has a preference for the youthful. My pen slipped from my grasp and fell to the ground. I convinced myself it was merely a coincidence. Foolish antics of youth. However, the following day, I discovered a sticky note awaiting me on my desk. Only 5 words. "Madam, Taylor has a particular preference. Unnamed. There is no handwriting available for tracing. Only regret. Immediate. Shocking embarrassment." That afternoon, Evan chose not to linger after class. He didn't so much as glance in my direction. And that, more than the message, more than the murmurs, stung. For whatever this was, whatever we had become, I was determined not to destroy him. He never wished for his name to be tossed about as if it were a punchline. I couldn't bear to see him diminish beneath the gazes intended for me. I trapped him by the lockers as the day drew to a close. "It's time to halt," I declared. He made no effort to feign confusion.
No dispute eros.
He simply fixed his gaze on me, jaw clenched, eyes devoid of warmth, and gave a single nod. "Are you suggesting we act as if it never occurred?" "Indeed." He gulped with difficulty, and then with a hint of bitterness. "Yet it did." He turned and departed. I lingered in the hallway well beyond the final bell's echo. A student streamed out, amidst the laughter of teachers in the lounge. As the sky outside deepened into darkness, all that occupied my mind was, this is no longer a hidden truth. It's a fissure in the structure, and it's expanding further. He arrived at class. He settled into his familiar spot. Not a single word was uttered. Chose not to linger afterward. I averted my gaze as I returned his paper to him. At the pinnacle his name stood out. Impressive. Assured. As it had always been. Yet mine, the manner in which he once uttered it, had vanished. He never referred to me as Anna. Remained silent. Simply, "Thank you, Mrs. Taylor." And even that resonated like a door shutting softly. I ought to have felt a sense of relief. I ought to have felt secure. Yet I did not. A sense of emptiness enveloped me. As if I had been wiped clean from a narrative I never intended to inscribe in the first place. As he strolled down the hallway that day, his hands tucked into his pockets and his head bowed, an understanding washed over me. The end had come. Not due to its conclusion. Yet, it was a mutual decision to allow it to fade away. He stood as my shield. In the singular manner he was capable of. By acting as if it never occurred. By returning to the role of my pupil. What about me? I found myself returning to the role of his teacher once more. The lady clad in ebony on Fridays. The individual who always maintained her defenses. The individual who maintains an atmosphere of subtlety, where silence lingers just a touch too long. Yet as darkness envelopes me and I shut my eyes, the echoes linger in my mind. The manner in which he uttered my name. The way he uttered Anna, as if it were a cherished secret. And no one expresses it in that way anymore. Perhaps no one ever shall.